well, the difficulty of figuring out what to do with our wastewater in winter and spring is something that we'd really like some ideas. Do you have any that just come up right away?
Yes. Well, for year-round residences, obviously a septic system has to work. And what is it about a septic system that makes it work in the winter? Um, the water is not around long enough to freeze. I mean, their septic systems are not below the frost line, but usually water is dosed in a pulse or not evenly over 24 hours. So it though even in Northern Ontario, those dispersal beds will allow the water to flow downwards and not freeze into an ice cube on the top. Um, Now you're talking about gray water. You have to, the biology has to not be freezing for it to work. So however
Okay.
you do that, it's going to be,
So it's kind of more right now we're dealing with buckets. What do we do with our buckets during the winter is kind of more what we're trying to figure out because right now, we've hauled them out.
We've got 3 people living there right now, so
Yeah. So
we're
just
not quite sure what we can do with it.
yeah. And even the whole thing of there's still that compost box, but is it actually even warm enough to use the compost box? What happens over the winter? Are we going to need to restart the biology in the spring? And is it okay to overwinter it if we are going to start it up in the spring?
by compost box, are you talking about something your toilet is connected to? Or gray
So
water?
It's something we dump into because we have like an outhouse and the urine and the poop are separated.
Mm-hmm.
So we dump that into the box basically, and the plan was to seal it up at some point and leave it for I think 3 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But then is the concern of when the temperatures go below -40, does that system of the 3-year cycle still work because it may get stopped over the winter?
Well, those 3-year cycles take into account that there are winters in between. So it's, I mean, if you think it's frozen for most of the year, you extend that 3-year cycle. But yeah, I mean, a big compost pile like the Human Manure Handbook, it does rely on there's enough bulk in that compost pile to self-insulate. But at some point, when the pile's too small or there's not enough cover, it's going to freeze solid. Gray water is, if you're trying to add gray water to that pile, that's more of a problem because that's mostly water that doesn't do much for you. I mean, feces and urine are like lighting a fire in the compost, whereas more water is quenching that fire.
Mm-hmm.
So for gray
Okay.
water, I think you would probably be digging something into the soil so that you're getting eventually at, well, 2 meters down, it's not frozen. I mean, from going back to the 1980s when the term gray water pit maybe came from that era where it truly was a hole in the ground with some sort of lid. The gray water could come in through a pipe, but I suppose you could dump a pail into it. The pit would be lined with some, I don't know, cinder block or brick, loose brick or something that would allow the water to percolate out and prevent the pit from collapsing. So I'd be more confident in something that's dug into the ground than a pile of compost sticking above. It's just
Okay.
like, imagine insulating a house versus
So
an underground house.
Is that the sort of thing that we would be able to do right now in order to be able to deal with our gray water before we've actually completed the assessment?
Well, I think you are doing it, so we want to make sure you're doing it in the best way possible. It's like I don't know if it's a chicken and egg thing, but eventually your dwellings or your occupancy is receiving enough attention that the authorities are going to ask what you're doing with your gray water. I mean, probably they're not asking if you're
Yeah.
setting up a tent in effect. I mean, you're sort of asking me my opinion on how long you can get away with the fairly light population you have right now. I mean, in the ECA, we're trying to look at your ultimate build out. And
Yeah.
That's another question, I guess.
Well, I think what we're really asking is like, what can we do legally and like, that's not against any rules? Is there anything we can do, or are we just?
Well, in Part 8 of the building code, we were talking about these class 1, 2, 3 systems. I think most jurisdictions, if not all, don't bother issuing a septic permit for a class 1 system, which is class 1 is your composting toilet all the way to your outhouse earth pit. It seems gray water systems, they do more commonly give a permit for. So I don't know where we got to in the conversation about if you're still under 10,000 liters a day, is there even a local jurisdiction that's issuing septic permits?
Yeah, so we have had further contact with the what are they called? The health department.
Yeah,
Health unit.
And they are refusing to even consider applications, which we understand is not actually a thing they're supposed to ever be able to do, but they're doing it anyways.
they're telling us that we're going to be over 10,000 liters. So
That's it. It's not their
that's
jurisdiction.
It's not. That's what they're saying. It's not their jurisdiction, which is something, which is fine. Okay, so now we're like I say, we've already started. We've been into this ECA for almost a year now, and we just want to move this process through. So, but yeah, we do have 3 members on the property, and so far, what they've been doing is hauling all their waste out on the property, from the property. I mean.
And usually, let's say a communal system goes into a big leaching bed, and that effluent goes into the groundwater. They're really only concerned about nitrogen. Nitrate specifically is unhealthy in drinking water. But
Okay.
we didn't quite get through pre-consultation, but I was going to argue that this property does not have a down gradient user in terms of a drinking water well. Like your down gradient seems to me to be the lake. But if someone, imagine another property and someone was putting a drinking water well on the other side of the property line, that's when you have to remove nitrogen.
And then I guess there's a little bit of question of so legally significant wording in things. I know that before you were talking about the use of the word lot being significant. We've been looking at the idea of backing that off to allocated areas because even if we go with sites, that seems to also push things into being campground or trailer park. And well, I guess we'd better get your opinion on this. I think that we should be trying to push the idea that we do not fall under any of the categories. And so what we should be generating is a new category for how to regulate this type of thing versus trying to pull out of the tables that exist regulations that don't apply to us and have assumptions baked into them that really don't apply to us.
Mm-hmm. Well, my concern about property lines, legal property lines, is there are clearances to them. But like a conventional septic system has to be 3 meters from a property line and stuff like that, which I think internally, like just so you don't have people fighting with each other, you're going to have some accepted clearances. But I don't know how are you that different from a trailer park? That, I mean, I know their parcels are very small, but in effect they are also some sort of dwelling unit on a defined, whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure yet that you're totally new. For wastewater treatment, they're really only going to care what impact you're putting onto the environment. And then there's, internal wells on the same property.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the code, you're supposed to have a well 15 meters from a septic bed. But in terms of this nitrogen impact, if they were to enforce that, that's only for someone else's property. They don't care if you contaminate your own well, or that's not regulated through this thing.
Okay. That
Oh boy.
kind of makes sense in their regulatory ways, but
I have a related question then. What's your understanding of the definition of a development site?
Like a research development site?
No, well,
No.
we've been presented as a development project.
yeah.
So
I guess kind of, are there legal gray areas in there that we might not actually even be considered a development? We're pretty sure we shouldn't be considered a subdivision. We don't think we're a campground. We don't feel like we fit into the trailer park. So we're kind of wondering if a development has similar gray around it.
Well, I mean, that is really a good question that people are scratching their heads about. I mean, I think maybe I can see a challenge with the site is who is telling you what you need to do if it's an unorganized municipality. It seems pretty clear that the Ministry of Environment considers you to be subject to the regulations, and that's because it's sort of a general impact to the environment. But how you would pay for, say, snow clearing of the driveway into your lot. I mean, Swan Lake was talking about that there are plenty of people who live in unorganized townships, and they often improvise as to how they do their services. Like you might pay something to the Ministry of Transportation to clear the snow on your road or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have enough experience with exactly your situation to say what is a development and who is regulating you. I know in Southern Ontario there's big rigmarole about site plan approval and this and that.
Okay.
It's all our interior roads are are owned by the property. So like we manage our own costs for that. So there's really, as far as the roads go, there is no municipal costs. As an example. But I like I said, I really think we should try to simplify this as much as possible and just focus on the ECA.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a handful right there.
To me, my ideal would not be to do groundwater monitoring wells. I mean, assuming I get them to agree that there is no downstream user of drinking water from an aquifer. And so that would save you. It's not, was that $15,000 in total or per well?
Total.
Total.
Yeah, I believe that was total.
Yeah.
So $5,000 per well, 3 wells.
Yeah.
Right.
And actually, we do have a full list. I don't have it on me right now, but we can send that to you. And also, we have what was sent in as a pre-application report, but we felt was not necessarily accurate to the situation of our project, which is also kind of part of why we had to pull back on everything so hard. Was we were concerned about the communication that was going to the ministry.
Yeah. So is there my question is, can we fix it?
Yeah. Yeah, because like one of the things in there is that it stated that we would not have any community centers or wells or comfort stations or community buildings of any sort. And that was not anything that anyone had agreed to. So,
so can we pull back from that?
Yeah.
Yes, you can do anything you'd like.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you have to explain. They have to be assured that you are speaking for your members. But
we'll have motions that we can produce.
Yes.
Yeah.
To prove it. So.
And then, of course, then the regulators they'll look at this ECA and the wording, and I'm sure they would want to know that some organization is keeping tabs on what their members are doing, that they're not building a 5-story townhouse complex.
So that is one of the things that I feel the previous board overstated. Yes, we are able to regulate and interact. At the same time, there's a lot more individual autonomy than they seem to communicate there was, or seem to even think there was. So we do want to make sure that whatever we agree to doesn't limit the autonomy of our members. So we have to make sure that we're striking a balance there.
I agree. I could see that in the membership and the answers people were giving, that there's quite a range of behaviors or desires, goals. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're getting some runoff from the neighbor's farm field, and I think that was what came out in some of the water tests. So I think Alex was suggesting that, if we made efforts to clean up that runoff, if that would, have any impact.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good idea. I suppose it would help. The further the lake is from being so-called at capacity for phosphorus, the better you are, the more room you have to add further phosphorus. But you want to convince them that your putting hardly any phosphorus into that water. So you're doing the best you can. And I don't know, if you have some defined flow paths from that farming area, that's an interesting question of how you'd intercept those and remediate it. At first I thought you were talking about going right down into the lake and putting some floating rafts across there or something.
So I kind of am as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I think, thank you so much for your time, Andrew. This is wonderful news.
Yes, thank you.
I'm really happy how this is coming around.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
This is a lot of really good news as far as we're concerned. So thank you.
All right, so I guess I'll leave. You want to continue your meeting, and I'll get back to you by email.
All right.
Okay.
Sounds
All
good
right.
to me.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you
See you
very
guys
much.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, Andrew.
You're welcome.
All right. So
I'm gonna have
Well, we got no money left, so there's another thing.
yeah.
Mm.
Well,
Okay.
we'll have to address that when Andrew sends in his cost estimates.
Yeah.
Well, when do we charge our membership fee again? Is that May?
Yeah, it's actually written in the bylaws. I think the one in the bylaws is the accurate date. May 30th.
Well, and there's some people that haven't paid their ECA fee, so it looks like the ECA isn't as scary potentially as what we've been led. So I'm hoping that the rest of the people who've been holding back will pay that, and then there's like I say, the annual fee, again, if we have to stretch this over another year, then the ministry seems to be open to that as well. So anyway, I think I think we're in a very good place overall.
We're gonna have to adjust the motion that said what all the money's going to go to.
Yeah.
So that we can actually access that money.
Yeah, and basically say like, no, most of these things aren't even required. So we're going to put this fee toward those things that are required and not pay for extra tests that
And if
weren't
we
needed.
do that, then people might feel more comfortable with putting the money in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well, like I said, I really feel good of having those two experts on our side. So I think we're in good position moving forward.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And you know what? The costs are what the costs are.